Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I am here with my longtime industry friend, Laura Jensen, who is the Chief Marketing Officer for Absolute Resolution Corporation. Hey, Laura, how's it going?
Hey, Adam. Good to finally be on the podcast.
I appreciate you coming on. And today I want to cover a couple different things with you. You've been so at the forefront of everything FinTech and speaking at all the conferences and obviously providing the RMAI board and others with just insight into what's happening into that space. I've got a ton of questions for you today. And I know that most of our audience already is aware of who you are. You've had a legendary career across the industry. But for anybody that's new to the industry, could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Sure. Well, it's an accident. I couldn't read, apparently. So it's a true story. I was started out as a paralegal. I got my degree in political science, thought I wanted to be a lawyer. But thought maybe I should try out the whole legal thing before I dropped all that money for law school. So I was a paralegal, as a corporate paralegal at First Data. They terminated my position, they eliminated my position. And I was very young at the time, and they were not like looking to like replace me somewhere. They were just like, good luck. So went home and opened the newspaper to the classified ads, which is how we used to find jobs, and found a really cool listing for working with debt collections. And I had been working with money order collections at First Data. So got all excited, sent my resume over, got a call. My first manager, his name was Kurt Brower. He's a great guy. Some people may know him. He said the ad was for an attorney, and I was mortified. Like, how could I have missed that? But he said he still wanted to talk to me, brought me in, started out as supervisor of litigation at Collect America. Okay. I did that for a couple of years. Had a baby, thought I wanted to leave the industry because everyone knows it's crazy. But by then I've been in 5 years, and I say that, you know, there's a 3 to 5 year rule where it's really hard to get out, and I couldn't wait to get back in. So I went back to Collect America and did debt sales. So people have been around a long time now. You know, we used to have a huge resale component to the industry, so I helped support that. I Collect America, eventually as director of sales. I did a brief stint selling third-party agency work, but loved debt buying. So in 2012, I joined Absolute Resolutions. Started as director of business development and worked my way up to chief marketing officer.
Awesome. So I know Absolute Resolutions is an organization, or ARC is an organization that has been around since really the very beginning of our industry. But can you tell anybody who's not familiar what you guys do there?
Yeah. So we're a national debt buyer. We typically acquire portfolios directly from banks, FinTechs, other financial institutions. But it's been a long and windy road, and we've done the resale, retrade, all that. We are a passive, well, what would be considered a passive debt buyer. I don't know if that matters that much anymore. We used to use it more often. We outsource everything from our management firm. We have agencies, we have law firms, we have some specialty servicers. So, and you know, that we have our management's in Minneapolis, and then we have a lot of people remote now since COVID came. I think one of the cool things about COVID is it opened up our eyes to having some really amazing people on our team that live all over the country. So.
True statement. I once had an office with a bunch of people in it, and now I'm the only one there. So I definitely understand that particular story, which kind of leads us into, you know, the FinTech conversation. I think it's also important to mention that you and I serve on the RMAI board together as well, which has been a great experience having an opportunity to participate in those discussions and to learn from you, not only throughout our careers, because you were one of the first people that I really, became friends with in the industry. But FinTech has been kind of like a passion for you. You guys got into it early. It's something that you've been heavily involved with. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and kind of moving into that FinTech market?
Yeah, sure. So, as an organization, we've been buying FinTech paper since about 2000. And I want to say some of the first purchases in this new organization were 7, I think, very early on.
Okay.
And we have found it to be, it was a little intimidating at first because we're talking about some very, very big balances.
Mhm.
And credit cards really are bread and butter. So to go from what, over time, $3,500, $5,000 average balance, sometimes up to 7, to buying tens of thousands of dollars as an average balance was something definitely different. The process was different. The fintechs were the disruptors, during the recession. And
Mhm.
so learning how to, and luckily, a lot of those people came from banks.
Sure.
So what we had the advantage of is some of them understood debt sales, a lot of them understood credit card. How could we wedge all that stuff together to get it to line up?
Mhm.
There's a lot of challenges in fintech. It's exploding. I think, you're seeing a little moderation in growth right now, just because of the way that the economy is going around the world in general. So
Mhm.
I look at a lot of the investment reports. And while their investments are down, they're still massive all across the world. They're still growing. FinTech represents, it's a very broad brush, right?
Mhm.
There's servicers, there's payment processors, there's lead companies, there's banks, there's home mortgages. I mean, it's huge. So we really focus on the consumer lending part. And that's really growing. It's growing very fast. And I mean, they're expecting it to double and triple in size over the next, 5 to 10 years. But it's been interesting. A lot of people you'll hear talk about the chain of title challenges. It's all digital, it's all online. So a lot of times you have to educate judges and opposing counsel. You don't have retail installment agreements that are signed in ink by a borrower. So lots of different things. But like with all other asset classes right now, charge-offs, collections have been great. Charge-offs have been down for 2 years now
Mhm.
with all of the COVID elements in the economy. So, but we do think it'll come back, just like a lot of other asset classes, and we plan to buy more.
Well, it's definitely a unique asset class, and I know one of the things that you've spent some time doing is is actually coordinating amongst other debt buyers on the association side, running the FinTech working group. Can you tell everybody a little bit about how the associations have gotten involved in educating both the creditors and the industry itself on that type of a new product asset class?
Yeah, sure. So we have been buying for a while, but not a lot of people buy in the space. I mean, I
Mhm.
think if I went around to the sellers, their buyer panels are 5 or 6 buyers.
Mhm.
But more people have gotten interested in it. It's always in the news. There's always talk about growth. So one of the things we wanted to do, taking off my ARC hat and putting on my RMAI hat, is, one of the benefits the association tries to provide is additional buying opportunity.
Mhm.
So how can we do that? And we created a working group with some of the FinTech buyers. There's also some members that either worked at a FinTech or consult in the FinTech space, right? So we got a bunch of subject matter experts together to identify what are some challenges in the space. What's different from buying credit card? A lot of people are used to buying credit card
Mhm.
or other types of products. What are some challenges here? And we address them head on. And I've been very pleasantly surprised. I've been in this space for 20 years, and a lot of people have always been very cloak and dagger, don't want to share too much. I've
Mhm.
been very impressed with the group of people we got to come together to share and come up with best practices, right? Because in one sense, we all have to be there for each other because it is a new asset class. There's a lot of risk in just getting a judge that doesn't understand or getting a bad ruling in a court, and then we're all in trouble. So
Sure.
It's been really fun to do this. We've done some presentations at conferences. We've spoken at other associations conferences, had huge responses. It's been very encouraging, and I like where it's going. I think it's a good thing for the association. It's a good thing for the buyers. It's a good thing for the sellers because we can educate them. If we're all in alignment on best practices, it's harder maybe for plaintiffs counsels to find, or sorry, not plaintiffs, consumer counsels to find holes in our arguments and do anything that would kind of ruin the space. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You guys are coming together to form a common ground, right? And
Yeah.
to educate each other on what are you learning in the marketplace, because a bad ruling, regardless of, one judge not understanding what is being presented to them could, cause serious damage.
Yeah. And
So
I'll
I think
tell
it's
you,
important.
yeah, and then you get like wrinkles like the New York CCFA, where the lawmakers really wrote it with credit cards in mind. And
Mhm.
so a lot of the terms and affidavits and things that we now have to work with, we have to navigate it together so we can figure it out, so we can try and mitigate risk, because judges don't understand it, lawmakers don't understand it. A lot of consumers that have the loans, I mean, they understand they applied for the loan, they need to pay off the loan, and maybe they defaulted for some reason. But all the machinations behind it is very complicated. And so a lot of it does have to be education, broad education for all kinds of people.
Absolutely. And that's a challenge. So, what kind of challenges are you seeing? I know that there's been issues with chain of title, there's been issues with
Yep.
documentation and media. And I don't know about you, but I can't honestly remember the last time I signed a credit card or a fintech loan
Yeah.
application, like physically. So, what kind of challenges are you educating the industry on?
Yeah. So I think the biggest one's chain of title. With a fintech loan, you will have generally, now this isn't hard and fast, but
Sure.
generally you have a nationally chartered bank that's originating the loan and passing it to a servicer. And the servicers are who we probably all recognize,
Mhm.
Prosper's, SoFi's changed their model a little, Best Egg, right? So they service it, so the customer really recognizes that name. But those loans can get transferred multiple times to different investors.
Mhm.
And then an investor at the time of charge off owns it, who sells it to us. But you have to account for that full chain of title back to origination in certain states. And that can be
Mhm.
very complicated. A lot of fintechs, they didn't build their businesses thinking about debt sales. So I'm going to go back, and a lot of them have been great to work with, and we've made our way through it. But that's been a huge challenge. We also have different state laws that have complicated our requirements to collect. Really, not so much that we can't meet those requirements. It's just the terminology and the ideas that they put together. Like I said, in
Mhm.
New York, it's credit card based. So you're trying to backfill and push things into standards that weren't made for installment loans. For example,
Mhm.
the Reg F model validation notice is really hard, and there's a big lots of conversations going on around how do you identify the original creditor, because it was an investor that the consumer may have never even knew held their loan.
Mhm.
So those are the kind of challenges that we're dealing with. A lot of it's wedging installment loans into laws that weren't written for installment loans.
And that makes a lot of sense, right? Like the legislation is really focused on one thing, but this is a unique and separate product.
Yep,
So
for
fintech
sure.
is very different. And I've done a couple of cool interviews on the Receivables Roundtable series, with people that have either come from the fintech side or even migrated from the banking side to the fintech side, which I think is it's been pretty interesting
Yeah.
as well. From your perspective, as a debt buyer and as debt buyers are starting to get more involved in the process, what advice would you give to somebody who's looking to move into that product space?
You have to understand what you're buying. But even fintechs, if you're buying credit card, it's virtually the same thing, no matter who you're buying it from. They may have a different customer and a different underwriting process you have to take into account, but it's a credit card. They issued it, it was a revolving account, it charged off, they sold it to you. Fintechs, everybody does things differently. They all provide different data to you. They all have different, they're very new, so they use a lot of terminology interchangeably or incorrectly. So you just need to really understand the product that you're buying and the seller you're buying from. And I think that just, price is king when it comes to debt buying, but I think that having a solid relationship where you can pick up the phone and call someone anytime to get clarification is really important. And I think keeping that open line of communication is important. You are going to get a lot of questions from your servicers. You're going to get a lot of questions from your in-house counsel. And it's okay not to know the answer, but you really need to have that relationship there to call and get the answer. And I would say don't guess on fintech. I think there's too many variables. I wouldn't say we've ever guessed, but I'm glad we haven't.
Better to go get the actual answer than to guess as to what you think the answer may be when there's 25 variables in an equation.
Yep.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Laura, I really appreciate you coming on and chatting with me today. I know that every time we are hanging out at a conference, I get to chat with you about fintech directly, and I learn a little something new about the challenges being faced from that marketplace. You're right. It's very different from credit card. Credit card is regulated in a very specific way. And those regulations over 25 years really made that product very, very specific. And I think everybody issues those in very much the same way. Whereas this fintech world is very different.
Yeah.
Right. And you see it at the conferences.
Yep. And I was going to just say, if you ever have questions, there's several of us that are buying it, that are involved in the RMAI working group. Anybody that has any questions, feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. Well, we greatly appreciate that. For those of you that are watching, if you have any additional questions you'd like to ask Laura, you can reach out to her directly. She'll be linked below, or you can leave questions in the comment here on LinkedIn and YouTube, and Laura and I will be answering those questions as well. If you have additional topics that you'd like to see us talk about, you can leave those in the comments too. And Laura and I'd be happy to come back on and continue creating great content for such a great industry. In the short term, Laura, I'm going to see you at the RMAI Executive Summit coming up here very shortly.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And for those of you that are watching, thank you so much. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, Laura. I appreciate you coming on today.
Bye. Thanks, Adam.